So I think it's important that we discuss the true nucleus of this whole Iran situation, and that is, of course, China and how they're responding. Because as I said in our last video, this is really about geopolitical chess with China. No matter how much people want to make it just about Israel or even the Iranian nuclear program in itself, what's really going on here, I would argue, behind the scenes, is that the Trump administration sees an unprecedented opportunity that they may never get again to basically checkmate China on the world stage by taking out two of their most strategic allies in the most strategic parts of the world in the span of a few months. And after all, if you were offered the ability to essentially checkmate your rival for many decades here to come and ensure your empire's hegemony on the world stage, in retrospect, it may go down as a mistake not to take that opportunity, which I would argue is the gamble here that the Trump administration is taking. This is not to say that there aren't concerns, that things could go wrong, but as I even warned, one of those big issues to watch could be, well, how's China gonna respond? Given that them and Russia are basically being backed into a corner right now, right? America's decimating them by proxy. America's rolling over them across the world. Is there going to now be an attempt to come and save Iran? And that's what could create a wider World War III style situation. And the answer thus far appears to be no. It appears that Trump is being vindicated on this because as we speak, China, it looks like, is sort of standing down. I mean, they're calling for a ceasefire. They're putting out performative statements condemning the U.S. attack, but we're not really seeing any meaningful response or attempt to back up Iran, which I would point out was the same story as Venezuela. Did China and Russia really come to bail out their ally there, even after Operation Midnight Hammer? Did China provide meaningful investment or support to Iran? The answer is actually the opposite. They started to pull back because they saw Iran as a weak and uncredible ally. And so what's happening at the same time? America is building that dominance, and China is basically saying, okay, we don't want this fight. We're going to stand down. And I want to tell you about it and explain what it means, guys, in today's video. So that said, let's get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, all right, take a listen to the official Chinese response, according to Al Jazeera. So China is calling for an immediate ceasefire and says Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity must be respected. All sides should avoid escalation and resume dialogue, the Foreign Affairs Ministry said. To which I say, really? That's it? That's all they have to say or do, right? No, we're going to respond. We're going to back up allies. No. Guys, we just wish you would stop fighting. I mean, that's as empty of a we're not going to do anything response as it can get. And as is pointed out here, you've noticed that pattern, right? It's not new. China has always avoided backing Iran militarily, as this article points out. Beijing did criticize the U.S. and Israel strikes on Iran back during the 12-day war in 2025, but did not provide material support to Tehran. And I think that's very interesting. You could almost argue to an extent either China is selfish or China wants to sort of remain semi-amicable with the United States for trade purposes. Whatever it is, this article points out, despite being a comprehensive strategic partner to China, Beijing has also in the past supported UN-led economic sanctions against Iran before the 2015 nuclear deal and has since procrastinated, very true, on injecting investment into the Iranian economy. Of course, earlier, just a couple of months ago, I want you to take a listen to what this same Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to say about the Iran and U.S. situation, because again, I'll point out, empty and performative.
中方希望伊朗政府和人民能够克服当前的困难，保持国家的稳定。我们一贯反对干涉别国内政，一贯主张各国的主权和安全都应当受到国际法的充分保护，反对在国际关系中使用武力或威胁使用武力。我们呼吁各方多做有利于中东和平稳定的事情。
in international relations, and we call on parties to act in ways conducive to peace and stability in the Middle East.
I mean, seriously, that's as performative of a statement as you could possibly make, right? Basically along the lines of, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just be friends with nothing to back it up? And you have to imagine that internally, there's a lot of conversations in Beijing right now about the America question from their perspective. And you have to imagine some of those conversations sound a little bit panicked, if not at least worried, because if you're China, you're effectively being cornered right now. You've just watched two of your most important strategic allies go down at the hands of America in the span of the last few months. Now, you still have Russia, granted, but even as it pertains to Trump trying to broker a peace with Ukraine, that in itself is sort of an attempt to reverse engineer the whole Sino-Soviet split that happened during the Cold War and try to say, hey, Russia, right? That's really what's going on with that too, right? Why do you think there's a direct American interest in brokering peace, and why I disagreed with the Biden strategy is, look, you want to basically be able to say, hey, Russia, don't go all the way in with China. Remain sort of neutral. Be friendly with us because, look, it's a whole power balance thing, right? So, and I will grant it, that strategy by Trump, the whole Ukraine thing, is not working quite as well as, say, it is in Venezuela or now Iran, but that's still worth noting. And so the conclusion is what, right? China is effectively back up against the corner. Now, one could argue on one hand that maybe they are so panicked about it, they're saying, okay, we have to start moving on Taiwan immediately because America's making its moves. They're doing it very quickly, very aggressively. We got to make our chess move. Although at the same time, sure, there's a case to be made by that. And I'm a little bit worried maybe that because America's being so aggressive, China's going to try to do something. But at the same time, you have to consider the military aspect to this, which is in Venezuela as one example. You're talking about a country in Latin America that bought the most Chinese military technology of that entire region. They're heavily backed up by Chinese and Russia tech, and what did that get them? As you could see, American military technology absolutely decimated them. We are at a point right now, I think, in this decade where American military superiority is totally unmatched by our major rivals. That includes Russia, that includes China. And so they may also be looking on the flip side and saying, well, there's not a whole lot we can do about this. Don't get me wrong. China is a very powerful economic force in the world, but are you seeing the signs clearly? They understand they're not quite the military force anywhere close that America is. I don't know. These are some open questions to look at. But that said, I do want to sort of briefly recap what we talked about in the last video in terms of why the whole Iran issue as it pertains to China is actually so important. I did try to explain it, but I'll be honest, I had just woken up. It was early in the morning. I don't know if I gave the best explanation for it. So that said, just so we can all understand the geopolitical chess that's going on right now, I want to bring you, and people will ask the question, right? Why does attacking Iran have any strategic interest for America? What's the point? This is just a war for Israel. This is for the neocons, et cetera, et cetera. I will say, I understand your concerns. I have reservations too about, well, is this going to be a costly quagmire? We all have Iraq PTSD, right? But why in America, in the world, in 2026, no, the Iran question does actually matter. And to explain that, all we have to do is simply take a look at Iran's geography and then explain what it has to do with China. And again, this is sort of the strategic U.S. interest behind all of this so that we can understand. So I want you to look at this map of Iran and notice what you do about their oceanic borders, right? So you can see this is Iran right here. On the other side of the Persian Gulf, we have sort of the American allies in the Middle East, right? These are the Middle Eastern countries. These are the so-called moderate Gulf states that we buy our oil from. So that involves countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. We also have a lot of military bases in this part of the world. And then on the other side of the Persian Gulf, we have Iran, and they're separated by this very narrow area that is, of course, called what? The Strait of Hormuz, okay? So needless to say, this little part where I'm putting my mouse on right now, guys, one of the most important shipping lanes, especially for oil on planet Earth, if not the most important one. And again, to people who say, well, how does the Middle East affect America at all whatsoever? It is naive to pretend that things like access to, say, natural resources, trading routes, shipping lanes do not affect the prosperity and day-to-day lives of Americans, because they absolutely do, right? So that stuff does matter to us. Natural resources, national security, trade routes, etc., right? So that's the situation in the Middle East. Our allies are here. China's ally is here. They're separated by this very thin border of water. If it's giving you some Cold War nostalgia, it should, because it's a very similar situation. And so while many commentators are framing this as just another Middle East war or something for the neocons, and I understand if you view it in that lens, why it just seems so pointless, I would like to bring a different perspective, which is, well, the threat that Iran poses to America, for those who are asking, is, of course, the fact that a major Chinese ally has the ability to, of course, close the Strait of Hormuz, which they've threatened to do many times, by the way, and essentially choke off not just the world's oil supply, but specifically America and its allies' oil supply as it pertains to the Middle East. And so if you are, and by the way, think of this as very similar to something like North Korea and South Korea, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, China and Taiwan even, right? If you're getting Cold War nostalgia of the whole power politics and chess game here that's being played by basically the two empires of the world, you should, because it's the same exact thing. And I would argue, the 21st century is going to come down a lot to control of things like this. Control of natural resources, shipping routes, trade routes, etc. And Trump clearly understands that, by the way. That's, for example, why he said, kick China and Russia out of our hemisphere. We want Greenland because we want strategic control over the Arctic. Hey, what countries have rare earth minerals? Let's start making security guarantees and deals with all of them, right? It's actually the same story here. You're going to hear a lot of rhetoric, oh, nuclear weapons, Israel. This is what it is really about. And that's why, for me, I personally say it is so important. So that said, right, if you're being presented with the opportunity right now, where the Iranian government already is on shaky grounds, and you're having these nuclear negotiations, they're not going anywhere, and you see the window of opportunity to basically take this off the chessboard and turn all of these major Middle Eastern countries with like serious military power or economic power even off the board for China and kick them out of the Middle East. Keep in mind, you already just kicked them out of Latin America. Then you've effectively checkmated them for several decades, right? There's nothing they can really do. Okay, you have secured your status as basically the sole superpower. China can be a respectable and powerful rival, but if they're out of the Middle East, then, and you have full control of that, and they're out of Latin America and you have full control of that, then you are significantly and noticeably a lot more powerful than they are. And again, you might ask, what does that matter for us? It matters because those very natural resources, trade routes, and shipping lanes affect our own economy, right? They affect our day-to-day lives. So for me, I look at it and say, the only actual risk behind this is whether that backfires, right? So what if the regime change attempt in Iran is unsuccessful? What if excessive amounts of Americans die? What if there's just a huge damage situation and actually the Iranian regime ends up more powerful as a result of this? Those are all valid concerns. But I would say, right, that given kind of the current geopolitical context where we just effectively rolled over Venezuela, China right now at this point in time is standing down. Now, who knows if we did this in, say, 2040, if they would stand down? Maybe by then they've upped military spending. They're at the point where they can really challenge us here, and maybe they actually go to direct war. Same might be true of Russia. Who knows, right? So this opportunity might not pass again. And who knows, by the way, if come the 2040s or 2050s, in a period where things are a lot less peaceful around the world, it's getting more chaotic, more violent, that Iran, as a proxy of China, doesn't make that aggressive move if they're still standing by then and say, okay, we're going to close the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to cut off the shipping routes for America, and it's this huge issue. And you're looking at it in 2026 and saying, wow, we could avoid a gigantic future global crisis by simply saying, wow, we should have taken Iran out when we had the opportunity. In Trump's case, he's saying, we're just going to go get this done, okay? And he's thinking a lot bigger picture and longer term than who's going to be calling him a neocon and forgetting about this in 6 months. He's saying, look, this is important for America's future. And I will say, I fully understand and can justify the rationale. I repeat, I'm not saying that it doesn't mean there are not risks to this. Like any major decision that you're going to make, any bold decision that involves consequences, there are benefits, there are drawbacks, there are potential risks, okay? There's a lot of different ways this can go. It might not end up always the best. outcome. That part is all true. But from the rationale of Trump, okay, I'm just explaining to you, this is what it's all about, okay? This is really why it's strategic, why it's significant, and the gamble here he's taking as well. If I could take this one risk and checkmate my enemy or my adversary, my rival, whatever you want to call China, right? For a long time to come, history would remember me dumbly or wrongly for not taking that chance. So let's avoid any future problem or standoff here before it happens and basically secure America's oil shipping and starve out, choke China out of that part of the world for a very long time. Well, if it works out, he's going to be vindicated on this. He's going to look like a complete genius, and that's just simply the reality. So we'll see what happens here, guys. I mean, it's still an open question of will the Iranian regime itself fall? What's their response going to look like? But again, for now, it looks like China basically standing down, not getting too involved, letting us do what we want to do in that region. So very interesting to look at. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.